Anderson. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, no, I'm not. Oh, right here. There's one right here. Just pick it up and transfer it, man.
You just got it. Keep one now.
Is it on? It's on, right?
Okay, it's.
I'm really done.
Now it is 6, yeah.
Laptop charger there.
All right,
Okay.
so. We're on, right? Yes, okay. All right, so first up, we have the Thurston Economic Development Council presentation that will present the role of the Economic Development Council in building, supporting, and creating a vibrant community. And I believe we have Michael Cade, if I say these wrong, forgive me, Aslin Mead. And then we have Mark Steepy, George Sharp, and Heidi McCutcheon on Zoom. So, thank you.
We're up.
Yeah.
That was quick. Thank you very much. Michael Cade, I'm Executive Director of the Thurston Economic Development Council. Thanks for putting us on the agenda tonight, about what we do as an organization. I'd really like to get some feedback as to your priorities for economic development and how you could look to us to put us to work for you. We'll talk a little bit about some of the work we've been doing out here in a little bit, some of the deliverables and some of the results of that effort. But first, I do want to turn to Mark Steepy. I take the leadership that our board provides us very, very strongly, very deeply. Mark is our current president of our board. He'll be board president for the next year and a half. We'll have that transfer over to the next board in 2 years. Mayor DePinto is on our board. Thank you very much, Mayor, for that. It's important that our organization holds deeply the notion that we are a public-private organization led by public and private leaders. It's important that we represent all of Thurston County. So thank you very much, Mayor. Mark, I'm going to turn to you if you want to have just an introduction. We have 15 minutes. I have about 600 slides to get through, so I'll whittle that down to 2. So if you want to introduce the board and kind of our role, and we'll go from there.
Michael, I know you won't boil it down to 2, and I will take 30 seconds because I know you will need all of your time. So thank you for having us. I think I was born and raised in Thurston County, and I know very much how this region works. And one of the big messages I'm always having within our organization is this is a regional, all the issues we deal with are really regional issues. And we really want to hear and know what not only does Yelm and Yelm businesses need from our region, but how can our region support Yelm and Yelm businesses? And so it's an open door conversation. It's awesome to have Mayor DePinto on our board. And so we're always looking for those opportunities to have those conversations, learn more, and do the best we can to support this overall region. So the entire board of the Economic Development Council provides Michael his support, and the more information that we can learn and hear about from the city of Yelm, we're going to take and look for ways to implement those ideas into what we are overall doing as an organization, which Michael will much better articulate than myself. So thank you.
Thank you. And then Heidi and George, I'm going to have, and Aslin, I'll have some slides here in a second, and I'll point to you for your sage input real quick as well. So if you hang on, if you can go to the next, you can go to our slides. That would be great, because I do want to talk a little bit about some of the results of our activities and kind of what it is. When you think about the Economic Development Council, think about the work that we do as we work on 3 basic platforms. We recruit investment into the region. And that is sometimes an employer, it's sometimes a vendor or somebody that uses our vendor base. We want to make sure that that economic activity is occurring here. So besides the recruitment, we do retention. We do an awful lot of retention work to make sure that the businesses that we have located in these communities are loved. Quite frankly, is that make sure that we're working with them and they know that they have resources and the data to pull from to change their business environment. We just came out of a very dramatic economic environment in Thurston County. I won't kill you with that data points, but please know that the heartbeat went way down, but it bounced back up, and we did a very good job. In the last 3.5 years, Since the pandemic, our organizations provided support service to over 10,000 businesses. These are coming through electronically or our doors. A lot of times we were closed, we were doing electronically, but I will tip my hat and I will put our team up against any economic development team in the state. Good work there. If you want to go to the next slide there, these are the things that I want to talk. Oh, so we do recruit, retain, and expand. If you want to go to the next slide. But the basic business platform is the last one is expansion, market expansion. We always want to look for opportunities to expand and extend our resources out into the larger world at hand. This morning, I met with some business folks from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. They're looking to set up a distribution center here for some of their products and maybe some light manufacturing for copper and lithium and a variety of different things. And so we've got them hooked up with the Department of Commerce to make sure that they know exactly what those opportunities are. So these are some of the things we're always, man, if I'm not putting the hook out in the line on the pond, we're not doing our jobs. But these are things I wanted to talk to you about. We're not going to get through all of them. But if you can just keep in the back of your mind, we recruit, retain, expand. I do like to tell stories about the economic impacts. I hate it when people ask me to do an economic development presentation and then we get stuck on the unemployment rate. It's about families, it's about people. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time tonight to give you those stories, the face-to-face of who it is that we impact. But the next slide will talk a little bit about kind of the backdrop. This year, actually, go to the next page, next page there. If you look at this is just the business interactions that we have just this year in Yelm. Again, I'd mentioned a pretty large number the last three some years, 10,000 businesses. How many of those were Yelm? Well, I didn't do that data pull this morning, but I did do a data pull for Yelm in this year. So right now we have 27 business interactions. You can boil it down in a variety of different ways and the sectors that they represent and the interactions by program. We operate two. I don't want to confuse the message, but we operate two nonprofits. 501c4 is the Economic Development Council. 501c3 is the Center for Business Innovation. For all intents and purposes tonight, our discussion is about the umbrella organization that we do that. So you start using the word Center for Business Innovation and don't let me get away with it, but it's the same thing. If you go to the next slide, this is, we start thinking about during the COVID years, in the last couple of years, how we infuse and support your community with capital. If you look at the number, that time is $465,000 were directly infused into your businesses. Some were $2,500 grants, some were $100,000 grants. So Target Zone grant, we infused $100,000 into a business for a business startup. They're up and running, and life is good. We continue to work with all the businesses that come through that we fund to make sure that there's not just some resource of cash, but there's only the resource and cash, but all the other stuff that we do: market analysis, hand-holding, business development. If you need some real estate, we'll hook you up with some real estate agents. We'll put our network to work for your business. But when you think about the return on investment, the last couple of years, you've had $465,000 coming back out of my organization. I write checks for into this community. It's a big deal. I'm going to turn to Heidi and George. I kind of skipped over real quickly about the work that we do, but Heidi is our director of operations, Heidi McCutcheon, and George is our rural programs manager. When we start talking about how we interact with businesses, Heidi keeps us on the straight and narrow, and George makes sure that our bugle, the clarion song of economic development, is really put out by George. So Heidi, if you can introduce yourself real quickly and talk a little bit about why we do this work and make sure that capital's out there. And then George, really is the art form of how do we make sure those relationships are built on, if that does make sense. So Heidi.
Certainly. Good evening. Thank you for having us and allowing us to share with you a little bit. As Michael said, I'm Heidi McCutcheon. I'm the director of operations. So I do the fun stuff like the contracts and make sure that the budgets are as they should be. I've long been in this type of industry where we work hand in hand with the businesses and the municipalities to ensure mutual success. I don't think that I need to preach to you guys about sales tax and the impact that the business community has. But that when both are doing well, that the community then thrives also. So within the businesses that we've interacted with recently in Yelm, you know, it's impactful. This year so far, 27 different businesses. There's a number of different groups that were able to assist and impact, from BIPOC and women-owned and veteran. And so it's always exciting to see us be able to assist those businesses and make their life a little bit easier so they can get on with doing business. So I think that sums it up pretty well for me.
Thank you, Heidi. And if you can go to the next slide, and I'm going to have George talk a little bit about how we put out that call to businesses and making sure that there's a voice at the table, and all the programs that I'm going to show you, the ecosystem is accessible. So George Sharp is our rural programs manager, and I will tell you that there is not an individual that works harder in Thurston County than George. So George.
Thank you, Michael.
Yep.
Good evening, council. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. When I can't sleep, I watch your guys on YouTube. See what you guys are up to. And one thing that we do is we have our study program. It's the third Friday of every month where we have elected officials, 3 county commissioners. Ashley's been attending it. The chamber, Amanda's been attending it from Yelm. And we talk about what are the issues taking place and what are opportunities that are coming up, and make sure that the study group's aware of anything that comes about. We send that out to our email list of over 117 people who are study partners to share that with them. I also attend the Yelm Chamber of Commerce, and if there's a program that's taking place that needs to be aware of, then I ask Joseph if at the end of the meeting, if I can stand up and share. Most recently, we shared about our Scale Up program, which is a statewide program that Yelm businesses are able to take advantage of as well. And that's the 2 main things, is to be engaged with your community and paying attention to what's going on.
Thank you, George. If you can go to the next slide real quick. And I think I'm going to stop at this slide because we're going to get into the weeds real quickly, but I can move, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So if you start thinking about the world that our head spins in, is here's our organization, the EDC and the Center for Business Innovation. So we've created an ecosystem. I don't really care if you're a business owner and you don't know what this program does. All I care that you know is that there's an ecosystem, and your businesses know that there's an ecosystem and there's accessibility to it. So all these programs here are the basic platforms that we budget around. So when I bring a budget to the board, Mayor DePinto and the board kind of reviews it and I say, yes, this makes sense, or doesn't make sense, chop, cut, move. And then this is the implementation. Everything from the steady that you just heard George talk about, South Thurston Economic Development Initiative, to Think, which is a local investment network program for your businesses to potentially get local investment. Southwest Washington Food Hub, up to the introduction of business. And the other thing that George mentioned was the Scale Up Train Series. A couple of these programs have been so successful, the state has asked us to take them statewide. Scale Up is one of those. The Washington Center for Women in Business is a statewide program. The other one that we took statewide, not because the state asked us to, but was the Washington PTAC, which is now being branded as Apex. Apex Accelerators, the Department of Defense. It's how you gain access to federal, state, local government contracts. Is huge. Last 3 years, over $1 billion in the state's economy. We have sub-centers throughout the state. I wish that $1 billion happened here, but we're required by the Department of Defense to push that out. So how you come into this discussion is, this is moving real fast. Sorry about that. I love my job. I love what we do. And I love the impacts that our team has. But how you come into this is that you help us fix this. As with any system, things break down, things get jammed up, things get cross-pollinated, things get moved around and maybe not funded. And we need to hear from you as to what your priorities are. We have the unique ability to be very flexible and very nimble. We have a healthy amount of staff members that does the work, but we have to have that relationship with the council. Michael, if this program the scale up program training series is about government contracting. Will give us the data of how many contracts were out in Yelm. It was 3 in the last 2 years. And I can pull up the numbers, but there's also something else there. We got Joint Base Lewis McChord down the street and we can figure it out. Or if there's something out here outside of the solar system that you want to create a center, your Center for Business and Innovation, you want us to come down here. The mountain Muhammad, if the mountain won't come to Muhammad, Muhammad will go to the mountain, right? So we need to be here. We need to be in your yard, and we need to be a partner with you, and we need to be hearing from, I'll be hearing from the mayor. He's my boss. He's a board of director. We take that very seriously, and we need to hear what we need to do. We need to return that investment back to you, and I'm proud of the work that we do, and I'm pretty sure that we can.
Michael, do you want to take this opportunity to hear from the council on possible ideas or?
Yeah, I'd love to. I was just kind of thinking. Well, stop talking. Kate.
No, you're good. No, it's been good.
I'd love to hear from you. And then Mark, you can take off the slideshow there. I'd love to get a response from Mark, fantastic board leader. George and Heidi, you haven't heard from Maslin Mead yet, but I'm sure we'll have something here. Yes, sir.
Question for you. It's just for business ideas, and when you said that you help with the research to find out if it's worthwhile to do or not. For Yelm, I've talked to some people who are involved in it, hydroponic gardening. If somebody were wanting to set up somewhere for local produce for the local small restaurants and places like Olympia Co-op, as well as the Yelm Co-op here, could they come to you and you would be able to say, yes, it's a viable thing that, not looking for big profit margin, but just enough to say, yes, it's something that could work out really well. And it is something that this community would really thrive from. Is that something that can be done?
Absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of our bread and butter, when I talked about the business retention program, the business expansion program is about business planning. We have the deepest cadre of business assistants, practitioners in our office in the state. So when somebody comes up, again, you don't have to worry about what door to enter. There's no door. Just show up, we'll figure it out. We do have some researchers on our staff, on our team, that will pull some numbers about different markets and access to them. Aslan has been our lead point on a lot of the agriculture. So I can imagine somebody come in, I bring in Aslan, we talk to them about the market, and then I bring in Sean Moore, our business. He's our director of the Center for Business Innovation. We talk about the actual business plan. And then we also have some products that they can avail themselves of writing a business plan. Some of those are online. They do it at their own pace. Some of them are face-to-face. It really depends upon what they need, but absolutely. Yeah, that's the work that we do. That's why we set up the Center for Business Innovation to answer that question.
And right now, just to say, all of those products are free. Like all of our coaching, all of our trainings are free. So it's really, you walk in our door, we help triage you to the right service provider. What if it's a coach, is it a training program, if it's an expert in research, and that we exist to help businesses to start up and to scale up. So
couple things. One affects particularly, the other's national problem, but I'm a local business owner and I talk with a lot of business guys. So one of the things that affect Yelm specifically, and it would be nice to see some partnerships happen, is in development in retail space. If you look around Yelm doesn't have retail space that's empty. Every place is full. I've heard from multiple people that I know. I have my own space, so I'm lucky. I don't have to worry about this problem. But there's a lot of people I know that have a small business. The problem is they have a small business, but they have no place to go because they can't afford to build. It's very expensive to develop a piece of property. That's when we need developer investment, something to say, okay, we'll build for the small business owner. Because McDonald's, the chain stores, national, that's one thing. But when you have a local person that wants to start a business, they have nowhere to go. Because Yelm doesn't have anything. Yeah, Spanaway, Olympia, Lacey, plenty of retail space, which is hard because a lot of investors see that, the banks see that, they say, well, there's all this empty space, but Yelm doesn't have that. Yelm is at capacity. we don't have empty retail. We have land, but there's no build out.
Which one of us wants to take that question? I immediately went in direct.
It's an idea, I mean,
It's an idea. Who wants to respond to that idea? Heidi, George, Mark, or Aslan?
I will, since it's what I do for a living. I'm not a developer, but I'm a civil engineer that works with developers, and I've done actually quite a bit of work out in Yelm. So I don't know what is behind not enough development going on in Yelm. I know for a while we had water right issues, right, that we had to deal with. I think we've gotten past those things. So it might just be really a matter of, again, educating developers on the opportunities that are there. We know what's going on in Yelm. There's a lot of potential growth in Yelm. I mean, JBLM is a great impact to what's going on within Yelm. And I think we just need to educate people on that are looking for opportunities, because I get phone calls all the time of people looking for ideas of where they could do their developments. And knowing that this is an issue in Yelm, because I was not aware that there wasn't enough retail space available in Yelm for lease. Having these conversations is huge to help understand that and provide information to people, because eventually that stuff gets spread around enough where people get you find somebody that is interested, that wants to take that jump and see if they can make something happen.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. And I was hoping Mark would answer that question, because it's a great example of how our board works with our team to find solutions for communities. So thank you for the question.
Michael?
Yep.
Yeah, so before the pandemic, I was working with Tammy, who was on your planning staff, and we talked about, let's get and look at all the land that's available in Yelm, available for development, who owns it, so we know who owns it, et cetera, and then do that, just what Mark said, was say, here are the opportunities to invest in Yelm, and share that out with the real estate firms that are interested in doing that. So that's something we can do again, is talk to your staff, identify what are the locations, who are the owners of that, who are property owners who are willing to either help build out or sell their property for that, and identify that. Take that inventory to get started with.
Thanks, George.
Yeah, I was, as I was listening to Josh, because I don't know, I'm still new to this, and I'm actually good to find out what George does, because I see George all the time. And I was this guy too, but now it's starting to make more sense. But I was thinking of, when it comes to business owners, a lot of these businesses, they don't own the actual place that they do business. And so a lot of it has to do with astronomical prices of leasing, and then these places, and then it's like, okay, so how can they even get ahead? How can they make a profit margin? Is there something that you guys do to help? Again, I heard about, you said there's services available, but I think one of the biggest things that Yelm has to deal with, especially small business owners, is they get a spot, and then they're like, okay, we're gonna start a business here, we're gonna do good, and then they end up having to fold because the lease on the place is so expensive, and they can't get ahead. And so I don't know, that seems to be a thing that affects business owners, especially small business owners. T-Mobile's gonna make it, everybody else is gonna make it, but the private business owner, there's no opportunity for them to even have a lease to own option. There's nothing like that. You just always give your lease money over and over again, and then the next year goes up, and the next year goes up, and the next year goes up. Where do you go from there? So that's a big problem.
Michael, can I ask a question? So not knowing the answer to this, I need to ask you. We do provide support to new businesses and small businesses in business planning, right? And putting together their business plan and helping them review leases that they're thinking about signing, and helping them understand what all their expenses are so they can put together a good business plan to see what it should look like in the future. Because I think the council member is correct that leases aren't understood by everybody, and a lot of times that's their biggest expense, that and salaries that they pay people. If you don't really understand how to deal with those things, that can be a really big problem.
That's exactly it. We have, Mark is exactly right. We have a very deep cadre of individuals that we can point you to. If we can't have that answer, if we don't have that answer with expertise, we'll find somebody in the community that does it, and we'll have that soft. And we've been also embedded into our organization, the Small Business Development Center, which is a creature of community college, but they embed their services with us. So it's a partnership relationship.
Firstly, we do have lease space available, but like Jill said, it's way too expensive. That is vacant offices with nothing in them. Prices are too high. But I wanted to say, I personally had a call from a commercial broker who had a developer interested in the land over by the medical center. And she called me to see, could we change the zoning because her developer didn't want to do commercial, didn't want to do the business front, blah, blah, blah. They had no idea what to do. And so I said to her, we need small spaces for businesses. Why don't you do like spaces for pop-up shops for small businesses? Oh, great idea, great idea. Never heard from her again. So maybe I need to get her in touch with you. And you can talk to those developers and say, do it, please.
I will tell you, there's an individual in our office by the name of Ashley. Just random. Ashley's the director or manager of our Washington Center for Women in Business. And that's her bailiwick, is to deal with pop-ups, pop-up markets and pop-up galleries. I hear her all the time. We've done a number throughout Thurston County. I'll have her Ashley call you or send you an email and just see if we can rekindle that. We can't rekindle that because that's an opportunity lost. So but thank you for bringing that up.
This is for Mark and then anybody else who can step in on it. It was brought up about how you try to find land such to, work with the developers. We have one developer that I've heard that been briefed about that is saying we can't get anybody who will invest for the commercial property. So can we limit how much commercial property that we do so that we can still do our housing portion, things like that. And then just recently, we voted as a council to take commercial property, C1, and turned it into R6 because the owner of the property said that I can't get anybody in here to develop it. And we need housing, which my reply was, commercial can be at a minimum, either 20% commercial or 20% residential, and then the other 80%, you can do whatever, you can mix and match. But we are hearing from property owners, nobody wants to come out here for commercial development, that it's impossible to do. And so how do we get those people? Because I'm hearing small businesses are looking for retail space, but no developer wants to come in here and build the retail space. They want to do residential. And I would really like to bring a encouragement for the property owners that development can be done. And here's how you go about doing it.
Yeah, so my response to that is just having worked with both residential and commercial developers is that demographics or pass-by traffic drives everything for the commercial folks, right? So if you don't have enough population base to support certain types of commercial use, you need to have pass-by people to be able to support those businesses. And I think Yelm is still, relatively speaking, a smaller community that the demographics don't support a lot of the larger type of commercial businesses. Smaller ones, they might, but also Yelm is not a place where people are passing through from point A to point B. And so I think both those things hurt.
We get about 50,000 people every day driving on our streets. We got a lot of passerbys.
Well,
Everybody.
I understand that, but they're usually traveling from one place on either side of Yelm to the other place on the side of Yelm where they've already got a lot of those facilities available to them. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Right. So I'm talking about more of like tourism type pass-through trips, or that's why you really need the central population base to support those businesses. I know that's what they look for. That's what I've heard when I work with developers that are looking at Yelm, is that the population base isn't there yet to support them. That's why everybody's pushing for housing.
One of the things that can I just augment that a little bit? One of the things that we delivered to the council in 2018 was the market analysis for retail. Probably time to rekindle that, and relatively cheaply, easily done, because it did identify some strategies that we could undertake. I don't know if that was ever implemented or that's the strategies were put in place, but maybe it's time that we as your Economic Development Council took that upon our deliverable to you is to revisit that. And I know the economic development strategy that was delivered from that, probably time to revisit that as well as you kind of go through some planning.
That would be appreciative, just because, as I say, when we're sitting here as a council trying to decide to change commercial to residential, it'd be really nice to be able to say, we need, we need more. And I understand we're not going to get a Home Depot or those kinds of businesses, but we need the space. We need spaces for those small businesses, those boutique restaurants, boutique shops, things like that, because that's what we have those, a lot of homegrown stuff here that can be done.
Michael, I was gonna ask you, I thought there was like a formula, and that if there's a Walmart, a Rite Aid, these certain things in place, then they are attractive to more of the big box stores. And if you could take into account our whole population, not just Yelm, but all the rural people that we serve, we would think that we could attract some kind of bigger box store.
That's what I was thinking about. You probably should revisit that study that was done in 2018. Things have changed a lot, different buying and purchasing patterns have changed, but I'd love to take that on. I don't know what that formula is. A plus B equals.
And it's no Rite Aid was in it, so we have
Pi R squared equals.
Do you guys have resources to help with funding to build? So if you have somebody with a piece of land, say, hey, I want to build, but I don't have the resources to build, you can help with that, and then we could connect.
So we don't fund projects.
Not funding, but you can help connect.
We can help connect. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, some of our greatest business development cases in our history have been working with a small business to go from a 2-person shop to a 4-person shop, work on the business plan, we'll help them develop a funding model, introduce the funding mechanism to it, and then work with a developer. And so there's a number of businesses. Salapia is one of those that was one of our signature cases. We worked with the owners of when they were a 2-person shop to be, 250 employees. So we can do that work. It depends upon the case. We have to make sure that we understand what the priorities are. But yes, we can. Thank you.
I apologize, but I have to go to that military meeting.
Okay.
So I apologize. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you, Mayor, for your leadership on our board.
Absolutely. And I'll try to make it back if it's slow going.
In reference to if you're going to redo the development plan, we have been changing a lot of our codes in reference to building. Would that knowledge be helpful in reference to what can be put together? I mean, like we've increased how high our buildings can go, what we're the frontage, things like that, and even advice from your organization of here's what developers are looking for, so we can change our codes even more.
The more we know where you're going, the more we know that what you're putting in play, the better we are as a resource to you. Because otherwise, I come up with a solar system. That doesn't create jobs. I mean, you create jobs. Private sector creates jobs. We want to create those resources for them to do it.
Oh, Ashley, sorry.
Thank you so much for spending your evening with us, Michael. I wanted to share one of my priorities is attracting medical facilities. With the amount of people we have here, we need more access to medical care, whether it be mental or physical, dental, all the above. What offerings does your organization have for that?
Well, so I go back to the more we know about your priorities, the better we are. So now that we know a priority is a medical facility, we'll put it in our work tank and see if we can't work with some of our known people on our board and some of the relationships we have and find out what that opportunities are. When the clinic went in on the other side, we were very quietly involved very deeply with that. So, and that actually came out of the first retail study that was done and that we facilitated in 2005. Crazy enough, but that was the residue of that work, is that we identified at that time a need and a lack of medical facilities, and then we could help make the case for that. So those are some of the work that we can do. I don't want to make it sound like we're a rainmaker. You have to be really careful about that. It's like, we're going to come down here, we're going to do, it's going to be, dogs and cats in the street, living, sharing kibble. It's not like that at all. We have to do hard work and we have to ask hard questions and we have to know what your priorities are. So, but thank you. Great question.
I would say just to narrow that down, it's specifically in urgent care is what people keep asking for.
emergency walk-in.
Emergency walk-in. So if you can put that out there, like, hey, because Ording has one. And Yelm's bigger than Ording, and people are like, how come Ording has urgent care And they're smaller, but we don't. And so that's what I hear the most of is we need urgent care.
Please don't just zone in on that, though. I want all of the above.
Yeah, but I was saying that's what most people say.
Minor league baseball team.
Any other questions, comments?
Can I make a comment from the planning piece of it, because I don't fully understand the whole issue around commercial, but I will say in the last couple of weeks, we've been approached by 4 different developers proposing to talk about, they haven't applied for really exciting mixed use developments. So I think the Mark touched on one of the issues, which was water rights. So now we're starting to see things come in. Housing gets gobbled up the second it's built. So I think that right now that is the easier pathway for a lot of people. We have a housing shortage. We're about to talk about that. So maybe that's one of the reasons. It's just like, it's so easy right now to, you know, build and sell houses. They don't want to go through the development time of the commercial piece of it.
Want to say anything here?
We've taken up a lot of your time. I would just say that it's really encouraging to hear, like, not to throw anyone under the bus, but we know working with the city of Lacey for many, many years, the city of Lacey was very business friendly and they had a lot of development and they have that reputation, and then developers come in to develop those properties, right? Or the city of Olympia wasn't so much. They did not have that reputation. So just that your council and that your staff is focused on these things and willing to change codes and things of that nature. I mean, that's a huge positive that you have in your camp. I also just want to say, just hearing the care, the interest in supporting your small businesses and trying to find them those retail places and wanting to have that unique character of your own businesses, not just the franchises and the national chains. I mean, it's just wonderful to hear. Those are the people that we serve day in and day out. We help launch them, we help scale them, and we'd love to help you with that. So we do have this was something we created back in 2017. It's kind of a hefty document, but I would, at least since we printed them out and killed a bunch of trees, I'd love to leave them with y'all. And so
Trees are already done.
yeah, okay. These are
They give you
Yelm back in the day, and we just never moved towards implementation. But it's old, but there might be something done.
Well, appreciate it. Thank you.
Carrie, Ashley Whitley.
There's one tree.
I can't believe you. Mark. Kind of wrapping up. Thank you for your time. And I always defer to our board leadership. Mark, do you want to have the final comments?
Michael, you're much better at making final comments than I am. I just want to make sure the city council is aware that we are here for you. We want to support you every way we can. We want to hear what you guys are looking for. I think there's a lot of opportunities. We got a lot of representation on our board, and sometimes it just takes one idea to get somebody's mind thinking about something, to put something into action. So the more we hear, the more we share, the more we communicate, the better it is for everybody. So I appreciate your time, and hopefully this will just continue a longstanding dialogue between us.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. And thank you, George, as well.
Thank you for coming. This was a great refresher on information we've had before, but a long time ago. So glad to hear from this.
Yeah, and also, just a lot of stuff in our heads. Just ask the question, and we'll get somebody to go and have a presentation only on how many public restrooms there are in Thurston County. We got that number. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Next, we have the housing action plan. Gary.
Yes. So I'm gonna kind of tee it off, and I'm gonna hand it over to Dan and Melissa. I want to give a little background information on why we're doing a housing action plan. And this is going to sort of represent, I'm not going to do every single slide in either one of these two presentations, but kind of go through some information that we've already gone through the Planning Commission with. And also just provide some context. We are doing this under a grant from Department of Commerce, and under the term, and we build most of the grant, but under the terms of the grant, we have to finalize the housing action plan by the end of this month. So that's why we're coming to you tonight. We're planning to have a hearing the planning commission, I forget exactly what day, but it would be before, obviously, we come to you to seek adoption. And so that's the reason we want to make sure that you're familiar with the plan. After Dan and Melissa do their presentation, we've got copies we want to leave with you so that you can review before we actually come back again. But we don't want you to feel too rushed, even though it is a rushed process. So hence, yeah, all of this work tonight. Okay, can you move on there, Kathy? So there's been a lot of legislation around housing in the last few years under the Growth Management Act. You're probably all aware that throughout the state, there's a really big housing shortage. And it's not just housing, it's, you know, different levels of affordable housing. So low income, very low income, extremely low income, and we'll talk about that. So what they've done in the Growth Management Act is they've modified the language to say, rather than we should encourage the availability of affordable housing, we should now plan and accommodate housing affordable to all economic segments of the population. So there's more of a mandate now in the state law. So that kicks off a lot of efforts at the local government level. So if you could move on. We've seen this before, so we've already adopted these code changes a couple weeks ago. One of the things that anybody planning under GMA was required to do was to allow these types of housing. And again, we discussed that at council a few weeks ago, so I'm not going to go into that in detail, but we've amended our code now to allow for permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, indoor emergency housing, and indoor emergency shelters. Okay. So these are kind of the categories of housing that we have to plan for. And if you look at the very bottom, it's based on what the area's median family income is for Yelm. For Yelm, that is 86,292. So these categories, for example, extremely low income, if you're an extremely low income household, you're earning less than 32% of that 86,000. And you can go right on up the ladder to see, you know, what those categories represent. Okay. So this is actually from SCJ's housing needs analysis that they completed for us. It states that right now in Yelm, about 42% of our households are earning less than 80% of the area median income. So those are all 42% of our homes are essentially less than affordable. Okay. I'm going to reread this slide. Yes, so the other thing that we're doing, and we're engaged in this process right now, we're required by the GMA to work with numbers that the Department of Commerce will be providing to the counties, basically saying what the allotment is of each level of those income households that we need to find. It's a hard thing to say. It will give an allotment of how many households we need to be able to provide for each level of income in the county. So how many extremely low income units do we need by 2045? How many low income? How many very low income? It's a process that we've just started with the county. We're going to be working with Thurston Regional Planning Council. And what happens is the county gets a number and it says, you know, you need this many low income, this many very low income. And then the cities and the county meet and there's basically an allotment. There's an assignment basically to each jurisdiction to provide these households by 2045 or whatever our end date is. So we're just in the beginning of that process. If you could go again. That was a very difficult thing to try to explain. But this is something that I did using a tool that Department of Commerce provides, and it's not meant to be representative of how things are really going to pan out. It was just an exercise to see for the city of Yelm, punching in the numbers that they had based on our expected population growth If you look at those categories, it kind of lays out, at least under this model, what we might be expected to try to provide by 2045. So for people within the 0 to 30% of the area median income, we need to find 76 units. And if you go down the line, people within the 50 to 80%, we need 1,500 units. So it's kind of again, it's a little bit of a simplified version, but it's just to kind of represent to you what the task is. And we'll know better when we get done with this process with TRPC, what our real assignment is. Is there anything more on this one? Okay, so this, again, this is not an entirely accurate representation because it's a little more complicated when you start looking at what your household income needs to be for each of these categories, because that income is also based on the number of people in your household. But this is just kind of a snapshot of kind of what the numbers would look like for folks that would need housing at these income levels. So extremely low is basically $26,000 annual income. What would be affordable to them would be a $647 a month, probably rent, of course. I think what we have for the most part in any affordable category is basically the low income, the 80 or up to 80%. So again, that's just a snapshot of the kind of numbers we're looking at what would be an affordable rent or mortgage. So if we could go to that other slide, PowerPoint. This one, one second here. That's all right. This PowerPoint was prepared by Reza Ruker. He's our civil engineer, and totally took me by surprise. We were just having a all hands meeting, and he, recently moved to Yelm, and he's basically looking for a place to rent. And Reza, being Reza, he put together a spreadsheet of all the rents for basically numerous apartment complexes in Yelm. So this is real-time information about what people are paying for rent here. And it was, he also did mortgages. I don't think I'll go through that right now. We'll just do the rents, and we can make this available to you guys if you want to look at it in a more thorough way. But if you could go. Yeah, let's get to renting. Okay, so these are the new apartments that are in the Tahoma Terra complex. And if you recall the up to 80% rental rate that I showed in the previous slide, this, of course, you're just under that for the 1 bedroom, 1 bath, $1,695 a month. And the rents go up from there. So if you want a 2 bedroom, 2 bath, you're at $1,895, or I mean, $2,350. Anyway, so next one, please. The Home Terrace, I believe this is also a new one, and similar rental rates. So the average is $1,865 a month. Okay. Squally Landing, I'm fairly, as you know, I'm fairly new here, so I don't know which of these are newer, or I know some of the new ones. I don't know all of the old ones. So, but once again, average rent $1,920 a month. Okay. Tustin, have similar. They have availability to cycle through these, Kathy. Okay, so I'm just going to stop there. I just wanted you to see those numbers. Yes.
Was Salmon Run mentioned in there? Because I noticed a lot of low income families. Yeah. Choose to.
Which one?
Salmon Run, yeah.
I don't think so.
Those are all the new apartment complexes.
That's subsidized.
Those are all the 4 new ones.
Oh, those are all new ones. Okay.
Understood, thank you.
So anyway, that's the sort of the, just as you were mentioning, lease rates, rental rates are pretty high too. And with that, I've set the stage for Dan and Melissa. So if you could introduce yourselves and come up and do your thing, I'd appreciate it.
Oh,
I was just going to comment.
Yes.
You didn't get to the mortgages.
yeah, it's
I know every single year, people want to go for property tax. Adds $100 a month every year. My mortgage has gone up another 1,500. So now, yeah, it used to be down here. Now it's up here. And
You're paying rent now. Yeah, I mean, I guess you should have looked at, I'll send you the PowerPoint, but yeah, the average prices for houses in the Tahoma Terra, for example, I think is about 550,000. It's all in there, but I want to make sure we can get to
All right.
these guys, but I'll send them to you.
Thank you.
Wow. Big arms. Looks a little big.
Slow it down. While we're doing that, my name's Dan Penrose. I'm a planner with SCJ Alliance. We're based in Lacey. We've worked with Yelm for a long time. So we're really pleased to be back here in front of you with the housing action plan. We've got a number of other projects going on in the city, and we really value our relationship with the city. So Todd and Cody and Gary, thanks for again trusting us with this body of work. As Gary said, we're working under a time frame, kind of some constraints with the way the legislature allocated the money. And so we're hoping to get pretty close through adoption by the end of the month for at least the draft plan, and working on a $75,000 grant. Gary didn't mention it, but he knows, and he'll probably be bringing it in front of you here pretty shortly, an effort to update the comprehensive plan. And so I will say that this work, the world never stops while we work on something and then allows us to put it in place before we move on to the next thing. So when this housing action plan was kind of initiated late last summer, we kind of knew it was going to fall in the midst of a whole host of other things. Gary talked about HB 1220 and kind of what that has changed from as far as the expectations and recommendations to some mandates. So some of those pieces are kind of packed into here, and they will be much more fully incorporated in the comprehensive plan periodic update that Gary and his team are going to be working on for the next year and a half. That also has commerce legislative allocation of funds, so that won't necessarily be entirely borne by the city of Yelm. And I think that you guys are already going forward with that process with your Unified Development Code updates as well as your comp plans. So everything's kind of in the mix, and Gary did a nice job of kind of setting the table. This presentation we made to Planning Commission, and so they're kind of spun up on it. They are ready to have their public hearing on expected to be on June 20th. And this presentation has kind of two parts. The first is what's called a housing needs assessment. So we'll kind of go over some statistics, and then we'll kind of transition into the action plan, which is much more about strategies and implementation. So next slide. We started kind of in August 2022. We did have a series of engagement stakeholder interviews. We did meet with Councilmember Richardson and Councilmember Kaminsky, and so we thank you for that. We met with a number of other people in the community, had some outreach with Planning Commission as well. So we use a kind of a dual hat approach. We do qualitative input from the community and then some quantitative draw from the available statistics. And so that's what we'll share with you tonight. We finished the housing needs analysis earlier this year, and we've been working those pieces through Planning Commission, and have gotten good feedback and good edits from that. So what Gary has for you, and I don't know if you've got it already, is kind of a content version of the housing action plan. It's not all gussied up and pretty yet. So we want to make sure we get your ability to give us feedback and edits and review it. And then once that's all clean and ready to go, we'll turn it into our final product, and you'll be proud of what that looks like. So it's just a lot easier doing it that way than porting it into a designed version and then striking through stuff. So next slide. I think we want to start with kind of the most important question, at least to me, which is like, what can actually the city do about housing? And there's a lot of things you may want to do. There's things you may wish you could do, and then there's kind of things that you can do. And so these are probably the four most plausible for kind of what you can do. There may be some other ones at the margins, and some communities are a little more interested in pushing the envelope a little bit on housing affordability, but essentially you can suggest development incentives. So you can give tax breaks to certain types of housing in certain type of places. You can adopt and update development regulations that either promote or limit certain types of development. You can provide financial assistance through fee waivers, land donations, direct funding. That's possible. And then you can also partner with providers. You know, Michael and his team are here earlier. There are plenty of other housing teams in our region. And so you can partner with people who are in that space to, you know, either financially or just with your support for those activities. Next slide. So those are the things that we kind of think, and we've heard upfront, that is kind of the safe, easier spots for jurisdiction cities to influence the housing market. Let's talk a little bit about growth, because, you know, I heard from Mark and Michael about kind of who Yelm is right now. You know this, the size of Yelm right now is not going to be the size of Yelm 10 years from now. And we were floored to recognize and realize kind of how TRPC, which is the primary demographer in our region, as well as OFM, which is Office of Financial Management, which kind of takes some of their lead from Census Bureau, how much Yelm was planning on growing, or it was able to accommodate a particularly residential growth. You can't quite see it on there because it gets a little bit yellow, but the population is about 10,250 right now, and all of the numbers are pointing to about 24,000 people between 2030 and 2040. So, I mean, my math isn't great, but that's about 14,000 people, right? That's more than double what you have right now. So you may not have those uses that you're looking for at this moment, but when you kind of float that carrot out in front of some of those folks, I think part of the competitive approach you might take with that kind of the carrot approach would be like, look, if you don't get in now, you won't have a chance to get in later because everyone else will already be here. Right. So you've got 14,000 people on the front end of moving into your community. I just want to capture them, grab their loyalty, and that'll make, you know, your discussion with them a little bit easier. So that's a pretty strong amount of growth. And part of that is the good work that you've done on the water rights issue, and also the things you have going on the western edge of town, where you've, you know, got large master plan communities that are kind of spinning up and getting ready to go. Next slide. If you want to interrupt on this, go for it. I can do questions if you want. Also from the housing needs assessment is this median household income thing. And I'm not going to touch on it because Gary did a great job. You're about where you know, about average for our region in Thurston County, and about average for the state in most of these things. I mean, this is not a newsflash, like the whole state and actually the whole country is having this housing shortage right now. And houses that used to be affordable are now not affordable, primarily because, well, there's a lot of migration issues going on, as you know, with remote work and things like that. And interest rates have finally bumped up to the extent that you can't afford the monthly payment for a house you used to, you know, be able to afford. So I don't know about you, but I couldn't buy my house right now. It's just the price has escalated, and then the interest rates at a point where it wouldn't even be feasible. So you're about where we'd expect you to be in the region. On the next slide, cost burden households. Again, Gary touched on this. About 30% of Yelm's households are severely cost burdened, and so there's some real work to do, and there's some real opportunity to kind of turn that around. One of the interesting things, and again, you know this, I've done a lot of work up at Base Lewis McCord. Your community is strongly influenced, you know, mostly positively by the base population. And many of those people who are seeking off installation off base housing have families, and that's one reason they're looking for off base housing. And your community in particular has met that challenge in the past with detached single family, decent sized homes that can have 3-4 bedrooms that can accommodate folks in a way that the on base housing stock cannot. Yes, sir.
And I just want to get clarification. When you say housing costs, that's not just the rent or mortgage, that is also the utilities, the basic utilities, or is that just the rent mortgage?
Yeah, I was asking Melissa about that earlier, that I believe it's housing costs. So I think it's not just your mortgage. It also includes kind of your fully burdened kind of rate to be in that unit. So taxes, mortgage or rent, and then utility share. And head to the next slide if you could. So this is where I'm headed with this JBLM population, larger households and young children. I think that's we're working on a housing action plan for Tenino as well, and each community's got their own kind of flavor on these things. And yours in particular kind of stands out for its large household size and a lot of young children. We talked to the school district when we were doing some of our investigation work on the front end this fall, and they're definitely seeing the results of that. The school district has obviously its challenges from the churn of those kids popping in and out every 3 years or so. So there are only 17% of households in Yelm are one-person households. That's a lot lower than other places in our region. So that leads to high childcare costs, a lot of demand for childcare. That is Michael has mentioned this in the past. EDC is very well aware of the childcare crunch. So if you want to put a little idea in his pocket, that's a good one. The childcare thing is a real strain, and it's very expensive, and it's part of that housing conundrum too. I mean, it's hard to have a couple jobs to try to make the income you need if you're paying $3 or $4 grand for childcare. Next slide. 3.5% of that on-base population are reporting they live in Yelm. South Sound Military Communities Partnership, which you're a part of and have representation on. I think the mayor serves there, does service member studies about where they live, where they recreate, where they visit, and 3.5% report they live in Yelm. The cool thing about the service member population is that they have a basic allowance for housing, which is essentially a stipend from the Department of Defense to live off installation. They get it regardless, but if they live on base, they give it to the housing provider there. If they live off base, then that's available for outside the fence communities. That amount is it's adjusted for each region across the country. Ours is a little higher than other places. Like if you're in Fort Riley, Kansas, it's going to be lower because the cost of living is lower. Here in the Puget Sound, it just got increased, and that housing is supposed to, according to the BA formula, it's supposed to cover about 80% of the housing. So it's not supposed to fully pay for your mortgage or your rent. It's supposed to cover about 80%.
Because I just know with a lot of military families coming here, they'll get their home, kind of helped out with JBLM, and then they'll sell their home here, and then they'll bank on the equity and they go buy something cheaper down south.
Yep.
And so a lot of them just come here for the season, and then they PCS, go somewhere, and that's good for them as long as they come through Washington, which has some of the highest, what would you call stipends for military housing. Then they can go get a nice house somewhere else. But that's what you see. You see a lot of people coming in, a lot of people going out, because unless you get that help, you can't live in something.
And we found a lot of the service member population will buy and hold and rent.
Yep.
Right. So there's more rentals than you might expect in a community of this size because of the nature of the population that rolls through here, and because of the network that they have. And this, they talk to each other and say, oh, I know Staff Sergeant's got a house, as he's about to vacate. You guys go rent that. And there's this term. So yes, sir.
It's just, I want to clarify a statement you made in reference to the housing subsidy and it's because being a former military member, that is not 80% of mortgage or rent. That is 80% of total costs. Because when we do our surveys, we tell how much does it cost for the utilities as well as the rent. And so I just want to make sure that that's understood, that is clear, that that's not for your rent mortgage, that is for your whole being able to stay in it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Thanks for clarifying that point. It's kind of similar to the question you asked a couple of slides ago. I think they're apples for apples on that comparison. I'm fairly certain the BAH went up by like 12.9% this last June. It's like one of the highest increases they've ever had. So my conversations with the people on base, I said, do you think people in the private sector are getting a 13% raise? They're not, right? So I think in this particular case, you've got a little bit extra purchasing power from the military population than you have from the civilian population.
So that in, sorry. This is actually a question Cody asked me and I didn't know the answer to. So that allowance that they get is not counted as income.
Not part of their taxable income. Right, I mean, it doesn't, I don't believe that they have to report it as on their, it's like not popping on the W-2.
So I'm just wondering, does that affect at all? Since that income is not reported, it would, and we have a significant number of people in the military here. Would it affect our numbers as far as things like area median income?
Yeah, that's a good, I think, sophisticated point because and I don't know the answer to it because it depends on if they answered the survey that, where the demographic survey is checking on that, whether that's they're self-reporting that information. But you are right that your E0, E1s through, E6s and O1s through O6s are their pay isn't necessarily comparable with civilian pay because they've got the BAS and the BAH going along with them. So that might be a decent point.
It also depends where you're pulling your data from. If you're pulling from income tax forms, then yeah, you're not going to see the housing supplemental as well as their food supplemental, which is also there. But if you're getting it from the employer side, it will be reported because the military once a year puts out a statement saying, this is what you're getting paid, but here's all your other benefits that this is what you're actually getting paid. Because they include what the medical costs, all these other things. So it depends on where you're getting that data point.
Yeah, I think that's fair too, because most of us pay some type of insurance premium, co-pays, all those other things, those are typically not borne by the DoD. Or active duty military population or retiree population, because there are a lot of retirees in Yelm as well. So let's go to the next slide. So I think what we find is that there's a tight housing inventory in Yelm. The interesting thing is you've done a really good job comparatively to most cities in the state. And that is a couple things. One is that I think the housing stock was artificially constrained because of water rights issues. You've been in the community long enough to know that water rights issue kind of had to fight it on behalf of the state, and it finally got resolved. And so now you can build again. But so a lot of that demand was pent up, and now the water is available for the units, and so things are going to start to turn. And then I think the other piece is you tend to have more greenfield, which is easier to develop on than infill compared to a Lacey, an Olympia, a DuPont, Stillicum. I don't know about Roy; they got a lot of greenfield, but everybody else. I mean, you have available land that is zoned for residential and available to be built. So I think you are building at a pretty good clip, 100 units in 14 years. 100 units a year since over the last 14 years. That's a pretty healthy clip for sure. Next slide. So the last thing here on the housing cost is that Melissa pulled some Zillow data, and that the cost to purchase a home in July last year was $456,000. So that kind of metric we put on that median sale line, and then kind of put the home sale underneath it. And this is just indicating that the median sales price continues to climb at a pace faster than incomes have climbed. And again, that is consistent across the state. So that just makes that affordability crunch ever more difficult at every turn. Next slide. Renter affordability has done okay in some segments. So there's some affordable housing units for those who make less than $75,000. I think you're doing somewhat okay to meeting the number of owner households and housing units. That's that kind of fourth bar over on the owner household side. But there's a lot of issues, especially if you make less than 50,000, you're gonna have a really hard time being housed. So next slide. So what does that all mean? Again, wrapping the housing needs assessment up is that Yelm is forecast to need almost 5,500 additional units to meet the population growth of the city. And that's fairly straightforward math. You take the number of people that the demographic says are going to grow, you divide it by a number of persons per household, and that gives you the number. And so your person per household is about 3.22. We just carried that forward into assuming that there's a little bit more than 3 persons per household, and then wrap that into a vacancy rate, because there's always a little bit of market flux. You can't have 100% occupancy. And that gives you that 5,486 new homes in the city in 20 years. Yeah.
You mentioned 20 years and a further date, but how far are we behind right now?
That is that 2021 estimate of population of 10,205. And then an extra 15,670 or 85. That so we've done the math in between. So we're not trying to fix any previous shortages. We're just starting from now and saying how short are we? How many units do we have? How many units do we need? And what's that gap? Is that okay? And there's a variety of sources down in there. So the 2 packets of the housing action plan. We'll pass out the content of the housing action plan. There's a handful of other appendices that have already kind of gone through the process, and that's where all that data is, all the ACS data, all the OFM data, TRPC, and the other pieces that we pulled from. So that's all kind of in the background. So now we're any questions on the housing needs assessment before we jump into the action plan and the strategies? All right, so on the next slide, I tried to summarize the 5 goals that have generally been identified to address housing needs here. Number 1, encourage a variety of housing types, densities, and a range of affordable housing. Number 2, utilize outside funding or assistance. Pursue the housing goals. Reduce costs is number 3, to allow more low and moderate income housing options. The 4th goal is to increase accessibility using urban and transit corridors. And number 5 is adding something called permanent supportive housing. So those are the goals. In order to address housing needs, each of those kind of little buckets are things we'd like to direct your attention to for action. So on the next slide, these are some of the actions within that would kind of fall within each of the goals. So each of those goals would need to address and have components of affordability, supply, transit, middle housing, which we term as variety, supportive housing, accessibility, and anti-displacement. All of these are requirements of the housing action plan language that Gary was directing us to from HB 1220 and previous House bills too that came out of the legislature. So the whole state is doing it like this. So Yelm is actually kind of on the tail end of the housing action plan boom, if you will, and most of the central Puget Sound counties and cities, as well as even some spots in central Washington, have run this like they were doing these plans in like 2021, 2022. So we're kind of at the tail end. The commerce is kind of moving into an implementation phase. And so there's in these particular areas, there's not a lot of new things under the sun. Most of the jurisdictions and municipalities in the state are trying to solve this in the same way. So those items, kind of self-explanatory there. We're just trying to make sure we're evaluating all the options to see if there's anything in there that'll break this open a little bit. And so on the next slide is an example of what the housing action plan looks like. So this particular one is just for the goal, encourage a variety of housing types, density, and a range of affordable housing. Remember, that was the very first goal in there. And here's some actions that go within that meet those the icons that were on the previous sheet. So what we have is we have sheets for each of this. We have an implementation sheet for each goal. So this is just the first one. I don't list the rest of them, but they're in the plan. And so this kind of says things like allow third-party review of building permits for development projects. An action could be allow accessory dwelling units or ADUs in all residential areas. There's one zone in your city that you don't allow ADUs in. And so, let's take a look at that as an action item to see if that's really what we want to be doing, or maybe there's some demand for that. For example, strategically allow live work units in residential zones. I'm sorry, in non-residential zones. So that's kind of an older model where the shopkeeper has the shop up front and then lives in the back or up above with the family. Or maybe on a different building on the same parcel, because that would also qualify. And then another example, just like increase the type of housing allowed in low density residential zones. So, evaluate whether duplex, triplexes, small houses on small lots could be allowed by right. And we're not quite sure yet where the legislature landed with the single family, the zoning by right, kind of duplexes by right. There's some language that came through the legislative session this year that in some places in the central Puget Sound, depending on the size of the city and the proximity to transit, you have to allow all types of residential uses. So I don't think we're quite in a place like that with Yelm. I don't think we've been given that direction yet, but there's potential for it coming up.
Can I chime in on the ADU thing? Because I think that's already been handled for us by the legislature. They passed a bill this year, House Bill 1337. We now have to allow ADUs in all residential zones, and we have to allow up to 2. So.
Can that also just be under tiny home? Is it tiny home an ADU?
Yeah, I mean, so
Not
yeah,
specified.
an ADU is basically any living unit which is an accessory to the primary residence, and typically it won't have its own water meter, for example. It'll connect in through the primary residence, and the legislatures said that we can now not require them to be smaller than 1,000 square feet. They can voluntarily be smaller than 1,000 square feet. I think that kind of runs counter to affordable housing. 1,000 square feet, at least in one pre-sub we had, they were talking about renting those for $1,700 a month. But yes, they can do tiny houses. They can, I think anything that is larger than what the building code requires as a minimum, which I think is like 220 square feet.
It's like a garden shed.
So anyway,
I think your current ADUs in code, if I recall correctly, was like 1,000 to 1,300 square feet. Was that pretty close? I think that's right.
That's right. So that's over 2 acres, it's 1,500.
Yeah, and we all remember that, especially in the 70s, there were lots of ranch style homes, like 1,250 square feet, walking in. That's a normal home. So
2 of those on a city lot. That's crazy.
Doesn't necessarily mean that one will fit. It just means that we have to allow the possibility of it.
yeah, and so I think
They
that
still have to meet I'm sorry. Yeah, but they still have to meet setbacks. And of course, the incentive, if 1,000 square foot won't fit, would be to make 2, much smaller. So maybe that would be one way to encourage smaller affordable units.
right. So that whole kind of evaluation process is kind of what that housing action plan is supposed to prompt, right? It's like we have demand, we have home sizes. Turns out the setbacks are too large or too extensive. So what would it do to change the setback to 5 feet or 3 feet off the property line? How does that impact the neighborhood? Or there's certain places we can do this and it works, and other places it doesn't. So those are all. The housing action plan is kind of a prompt to a lot of these discussions. So on the last slide then is just kind of where we're at with the next steps. We have scheduled a public hearing on June 20th, so we expect the planning commission to conduct that, and then working to bring this back in front of you toward the end of the month. The current deadline for the HAP is June 30th is the grant deadline. There's pretty good reason to think that there's a little bit of room in there provided we continue to make progress for jurisdictions like Yelm. We're going to stick to that June 30th deadline as your target. So what questions can I answer?
When you were talking about action, some plan ideas and reference to trying to help out the seniors, citizens and that particular category of homeowners is what can we as a city do to look at doing what California did in the late 70s, early 80s of Proposition 13 of saying, hey, at a certain point, property assessed value is frozen while you still own the home, because the thing that a lot of seniors are running into is they bought their home, they bought their forever home, and they bought it at $200,000. They have the whole plan, but now that $200,000 home is gone up to $500,000, $1 million, or something like that. So now they are priced out of it because they can't even make the property tax. So what can we as a community do, and our other communities to kind of say, hey, at a certain point, we need to freeze this property tax, not the tax percentage, but the assessed value until it's sold.
Yeah, I think it just depends on what problem you're trying to solve. And whether that's an affordable housing issue that I mean, when in that example, when they go to sell, they're selling it for $500,000, right? Or $1 million.
Right. But then the new owners have the new assessed value.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. I can speak from my own personal experience. I'm now looking at the fact that in about 5 to 10 years, I can retire. And so now I'm trying to plan everything. And my house value keeps going up and up and up. I mean, it's doubled in 5 years, the assessed value. And I just scratch my head going, it went from 1 to it's doubled in 5 years. You're going to price me out when it comes down to property tax, because once I remove my income and I'm working off of my pension and 401k, I now fall into that 30% category.
You just have to get a reverse mortgage.
Well, but that's what I'm wondering.
Equity, that's all you can do.
That also limits the amount that's going to, your successors as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think reverse mortgages are great to a certain extent, but that's not viable for everybody because it causes problems, as you said.
And when I think what you're seeing right now, I'm not an economist, certainly not in the residential space as much as some of you are, but because interest rates have increased right now, people are staying in homes that they wouldn't have otherwise stayed in because there's the cost of, even with an increased value, the cost of moving is actually, they're not going to end up moving up as much as they want. It ends up being a lateral or less than lateral. So there's a whole host of factors at play that we can't control, and you can't control. That's why I kind of started with those first pieces. So as you look through the plan itself and the action items, we're just kind of seeking your feedback on whether it kind of matches the test that you might apply to it. And if you think it doesn't go far enough, let us know. If you think it went too far, let us know. And we'll definitely, have that dialogue with you. So other comments?
I can say something to the council if I could. So on this housing action plan, of course, we want your feedback on any part of it that you are interested in, but I think pages 25 through 31, where we have the goals and actions, is the part that is of most importance, because if we adopt those goals and actions will then be sewn into the comprehensive plan and our development codes. So we're making decisions about what we're going to be doing in the future based on what we commit to here.
The only thing that I would add real quick is that there are, if you look through the document, there are some sections that kind of explain, what an ADU is, why it's important, or what cottage housing is. So I encourage you to look at those sections as well, just to kind of get a better understanding, because you can know what it is, but you don't know what it is. And I think that those sections really help to kind of explain it more in layman's terms, but also if you read it and you're like, I still don't understand it, let us know. Because, yeah.
One of the other plans you had up there was to reduce permit, study fees, things like that. Some of those are directed by the state and county. I mean, I don't think, is the state and county looking at lowering those as well? To help out with the thing, or are they gonna put the whole cost on the local municipality of the city?
Yeah, there are plenty of mandated state fees that are part of the permitting and development process. And then there's only so much, again, flexibility that staff has with some of even just the processes. I mean, we have to route things, certain places. For example, your SEPA threshold is really high. So I mean, the burden or the barrier to entering this market, when you consider an environmental review process like a SEPA, is already very accommodating compared to most everywhere else in the state. I mean, that was one thing that really struck me. That for example, the square footage, I believe, for requiring SEPA for commercial structure is 5,000 square feet. In most places, I think it's 30 here, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember the high, and which is, and if Mark was on here, he'd probably tell you this, from a development standpoint, you're always looking at that stuff because the SEPA process injects a time frame that you can't necessarily expedite. And it just kind of, time is money a lot of times with the development process. And then also it injects uncertainty into the process, which you can have appeals and other pieces kick in. And so I feel like the city's already done quite a bit. You're right. You can't cut all fees down to zero, and nor should you, because at some point development sort of needs to pay its way. That's kind of the concurrency that GMA's rests upon. It is that a development comes in, they're paying staff time to review, because if they're not paying staff time to review, somebody is, right? And that's the property tax or sales tax argument that you might come back to. It's like someone's going to have to pay that person to do that review. So you don't want to get too far down the line. You just want to make sure there's not barriers and you're not hearing from the development community that, hey, I can't get this out the door. And again, what Michael said is that this community has a very business friendly, builder friendly mindset. And I think that's shown, being played out by everything that's going on the, Christian Highlands and stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
That would be beneficial.
Okay, council applicant application review. Who's going to talk about that?
Did you want to bring it up on the screen?
So council should have received an email today from Kathy regarding the different applicants. I believe we have 10 total. She's going to put it up here. She's going to put it up here shortly. We have 10 applicants, and we'll get the list up here in just a second. But only 2 candidates are going for the position. All the rest are, are running for the position. The rest are not. So they will be, what's that?
The rest are just fill in.
Correct. So get that list up. Well, there it is. Almost. Oh, because it has.
Let me grab the email first. Yeah, grab the email instead. Sorry. I'll grab the email that it was sent to council today.
But it is, Todd, do you want to talk about the ranked choice voting and this is software we have and how that's going to go down and all that?
Yeah, so we are, the idea with ranked choice voting, once again, this time we will use an app that we will purchase for the city to use. We plan to do a run through on this tomorrow morning to practice, make sure we got the app figured out, and so it's clear and on the 13th when we put it up on the screen to show everybody to be transparent with how it works. The one thing we haven't been able to determine yet, we should know by tomorrow, is if it may require that each council member log into your computer. Right here.
It might.
Same thing I did.
Not though. Try to make it easy.
So we're looking to see if that's the way it has to go, or we can just enter
That's what I have.
your names with the candidates, and then as you vote, we would plug in those votes up on the screen.
For the ranked choice voting, is it still exposing how each council member voted in rank? So just so you guys understand, everybody will see how you vote and who you voted for. There is no secrecy.
Right.
Okay, good.
To be there.
Yes.
So embarrassing.
Part of the job.
And do you want to talk about like how many we would?
Yeah, that's not, I didn't even do all.
Five
Yeah, so,
candidates or?
and this is up to the council, but my suggestion would be whittle it down to your top three. There's 10 options, obviously, but if you put your top three choices up there, it would move the process a lot. Well, not necessarily, but it would be easier to input and all that stuff. Is there a preference, or would you want all 10 up there? I'm looking at you, Councilmember Crossman, you seem to be concerned.
I'm wondering if ranked choice doesn't matter. It's like if you have all 10 or only.
It doesn't, it's just more work.
Well, it's all in the app, so it's just boop, 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 boop.
Well, council too, you have to write it down, all that stuff. But if you want to do that, that's fine. Councilmember,
Top five.
whoever. Holly. You want me-
I'm not gonna be here,
So
so,
do you want to call on?
oh, I'm sorry, Terry. Oh,
Top five? I'll just do top five.
That's what you want. I'm sure.
How would you do that?
how would you determine who the top five are?
By pressing one, two.
So, yeah, so I believe what the confusion is, all 10 will still be on the ballot, but you would just vote 1 through 5. You wouldn't have to go all the way 1 through 10. I mean, you could if you wanted to, that's what we're talking about.
Would that still be accurate? I'm not.
Yeah, because it all gives them a score. So every number adds up to a score. So once the first round goes, then it would go down automatically to the top, 5 anyway, and then it would
Whatever you choose, yeah. The people that aren't on there, that you don't choose in your top 5 would just be a 0.
So last time we did this, we had 5 candidates and we ranked 1 through 5. Is when we did it here. So we ranked our top 5 choices, but we only had 5 to rank from. So now that we have 10, it's really up to you if you want to go through 1 through 10 on your.
What capacity does the app have for candidates? Is there a top number that it can take? No.
Yeah, we can handle 10 if that's a question.
Absolutely. And so do you anticipate us, if everybody, what if like half of them don't actually come in, then we'll still just judge them based on their application?
That's up to you, yeah.
All of us.
But didn't it say it was a requirement? When I read what you wrote.
The email that went to the applicants did say that attending the next.
No, that's what I'm
meeting is a
asking.
Requirement, yes. And that was on the
So then they.
advertisement that was
If they
also.
Is that,
So that was
the
my
way
question.
it's supposed to go? Okay.
I wouldn't know.
I mean, in my head, yeah,
Oh, but that probably needs to be decided.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
I won't vote for somebody if they don't show up.
You won't.
No, if they don't show up, it's not important to them. I'm not gonna vote for them.
What if they show up virtually?
That's reasonable.
Okay. But no.
Like I said, reasonable. I
Sort of
prefer, but it's reasonable.
I was gonna add, I agree with Kaminsky. If we are going to limit, let's at least go 50% of the 10. Let's go with the top 5 at least.
Is that what I'm hearing? 5 from council?
I like 5, and that's if all and show up.
They never all show up, so.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
You good with 5?
I'm not gonna be here.
Okay, good.
Does that mean you won't be voting?
I can't unless I can vote ahead of time.
If you do virtually, you can.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
My flight doesn't land till 6:30.
Oh, we vote 6:35.
Joshua, is 5 okay?
As long as it's fair. I mean, I guess I just don't know how that works, so.
Can somebody vote? by
As long as it's
proxy
fair
for
for
me?
everybody, and then I
Fair.
Okay.
I don't know why they have to
Somebody
be
vote by
here.
proxy. for me?
It's mandatory to be.
I don't think we can do, I don't think we can do that. Legally, I don't think we can, but
Vote by proxy.
you have to be in attendance either virtually or in person to make a vote.
If we put it to the end of the meeting, you can chime in.
I'll ask the pilot. I'm in. I'm in
You can
seat- I'm in
try.
seat two.
It's scheduled to be on the first
Don't I-
agenda item.
No, there's no, unless my flight changes again, there's no way I'm gonna make it. If for some reason it does, I will call in. Definitely. Cool.
All right, what are else? All right, so up here is the 10 candidates. Like I said, there are 2 that are currently running for the position who have filed for this position. That's Stephanie Kiesinger and Tracy Wood.
Kingizer,
How do you pronounce it?
Kingizer.
Kingizer, excuse me, Kingizer. Those are the 2 that are currently running, the rest are not. So if those 2 were elected, excuse me, if one of those 2 were appointed, but they would have the seat unless they lost the election. Yeah. Easiest way to say it. Everyone else would, for one of those 2 would be that, let's say anyone else got it, received the appointment, they would be holding that seat until the election is certified in November by the county. And then either Stephanie or Tracy would take that seat upon certification.
Do any of these applicants currently serve on any of our commissions or committees or task force? I didn't see it in the
Don't believe so.
application.
I don't,
So,
I'd have to double check it. None of them are ringing a bell.
I believe so.
Not even the ones running for election.
correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Concerns on it? Okay.
Just to rank 5.
Yes.
See who shows up. I'll be surprised if 5 show up.
Fireworks.
You wake Rob?
One more question. How are you deciding? Because when we did this with me, it was random, but how are you deciding who's going to interview with us first?
We can,
Like
we can
present.
randomize that too.
Okay.
Fireworks.
Fireworks.
Yeah.
Finish it off with a bang.
Oh.
Oh, good. Anyone put it on? Right.
It's a softball like that.
You're
to
just
make
a
you want-
firecracker.
Okay, so I put this in a format that would kind of be easy to see an option. So the top times that you see there, starting June 28th through December 31st, is the RCW and the state code. That is basically our current adopted code. It is slightly different. In going through our code, what we did in 1997, we adopted the RCW of the state code. And when we did that, we listed what those times of discharge and purchase were. Since 1997, the RCW in regards to discharge and purchase changed, but we never did change our section that listed the original RCW. So either way, we're going to clean the code up on the 27th. It will come to you cleaned up with the original adoption of the RCW, if that's in fact where you want to go with it. We put the Thurston County code below for comparison purposes, because I understand there was some discussion about being consistent with Thurston County. So that is why I put what Thurston County has for purchase and discharge. You can see it's extremely more limited than the RCW. And then the section below is, I understand there was some interest in having a section added that would authorize the mayor in consultation with the local fire marshal and any other official person in that capacity to limit or restrict fireworks in an extreme hazard or extreme weather event, such as obviously being boat dry. So in that language below, we took from what Thurston County currently has in their code. They've had that in there for several years, and I believe they've enacted that a couple times during that time period. So this language is just consistent with what the county has in regards to being able to limit the discharge of fireworks should the weather not do that. And on the back, and there's just a piece on the back, and all that was put back there is just to let you know that regardless. Oh, you know what? My new ones didn't have it. But you guys took them in my last meeting. All of mine have it. Okay, all it says, I'll just read it. And all it says was, we will clean up Yelm Municipal Code 5.32 at the June 27th council meeting, regardless of the council changes decided. The current municipal code will be cleaned up and be more in line with the RCW that was originally adopted in ordinance 600 in 1997. So either way, on the 27th, whether you don't want to do anything with it, you want to leave it exactly the way it is, we'll still come on the 27th to amend the code to clean it up to be consistent with what the RCW currently is, which was always the intent of the original code. It just, we tweaked it a little bit with the hours. And then since that time, the state's changed, we just didn't change ours. So
we can still maintain the current code if we want to.
yeah, so the one on top, and it is slightly different than what our code said. But it's only because we didn't change it. So yes, we would keep it what this code is at the top. And again, one of the big differences is on June 28th, our current code allowed them to start purchasing at 9 a.m. The RCW says noon. The only other piece that was different is July 6th. We had the ability to purchase and fire them off still on July 6th, and the RCW does not. And so either way, our code would go to that because technically we can't be less restrictive than state code. So this just brings us in line with what the RCW is.
So December 27th to 30th, you can buy everything, but you have to wait till New Year's Eve.
Yes. Yep. And then obviously, as you see down below, the county does not allow anything over December.
Yeah, county's much party.
Yeah, you basically just got one day to fire them off on the county code, and that's it. It's pretty restrictive, and so I don't know if there's any questions. I know that's why the chief hung around. If you had any enforcement questions in regards to his opinion on these different ones.
It doesn't have to be one or the other, right? We could pick and choose.
You can, it just doesn't have, you can't be less restrictive than the RCW. Yeah.
I mean, we could take pieces.
Yeah.
If you're suggesting that we do like December 31st, you can discharge, yes, we can do that
Yeah.
instead of doing just the way the county is.
So the only thing I would say to that, I don't know if the chief may agree or not, but trying to find something that is consistent in other places would be good. If we tweak ours to the point where it's so specific to Yelm, we're surrounded by other communities, we're surrounded by the county. And so trying to enforce that differences if someone lives one block down and, you know, I mean, that'd be the only thing I would caution you from is that. But Terry.
Would the local people that sell fireworks know these times, these regulations? Because otherwise, how would you know when to buy something? If you look it up online, when?
Yeah, the police department advertises it every year.
Yeah, no, the local people who sell fireworks are very familiar with the 1997 code that's been in effect for quite some
So
time.
they would already be adhering to these times.
The only difference which he mentioned was on June 28th, they've been allowing people to sell at 9 a.m. But then it's always been noon, which I was under the impression of, and that's when you would have to make sure you get clear of your inspection, then you can sell. You cannot sell until you get cleared of inspection on the 28th.
Yeah.
And so that's why there was that window, but the inspector started showing up at 7. Hey, you guys good go? Yeah. I was like, okay.
I haven't heard what Chief had to say. I know that there's the concern of trying to enforce if we go to the same as Thurston County. Difficult becomes enforcement because everybody starts firing off and, you know, how do you go about doing it? I think part of the enforcement can be adjusted in the sense of educating. And then maybe somewhere down the line, we go, okay, now when we finally get a large enough police force, we go, okay, now we really are going to enforce. I think we should be the same as the county. Just because as was pointed out by the city administrator, it's becomes very difficult. I mean, like my neighborhood across the street is county. My side is not. And so it comes down to what's going on. And the people from the county may all of a sudden be calling in, not realizing that, hey. And so I think it's inconsistent as the way to go. So that it's enforcement across the board.
I want to mention something on that, just because when it comes to the opening of purchases, and then once you have the item as you purchase, I feel like you should be allowed to utilize it and find out whether or not you've been bamboozled. I'm serious. There are some crap fireworks out there. So when I sold fireworks, I would tell people, I said, here's the thing. Take this home, try it out tonight. If you like it, come back, buy some more. And they would come back the next day and like, I want all of those. Like, you got it. Because what it's doing now, you have in your possession something that you've purchased. You should be allowed to utilize that thing. If not, then you shouldn't be selling it at all. So if you're giving people that they have it in their possession to use, then it makes sense for them to discharge it. Now, here's the thing is, some people might do a 3rd of July thing, go crazy and it's like, well, that guy was nuts. And then the 4th of July, you're like, okay, that's when it should happen. So you're going to hear these things throughout the community regardless. But I really think it is, if you're going to open it to sale, then it makes sense for them to discharge or else don't have the sale. And there are a lot of purchases made in this community that benefit nonprofit organizations, sports teams, and just they use this as their one fundraiser for the year to supplement their funds throughout the year. And it's huge. So you're going to cut into that bottom line. If you can't utilize what you purchase, you're messing up their sales.
Two things, and one in regards to that. People move to Yelm because they like Yelm, and this is one of the little things that make Yelm different than everybody else. If you want to come here and change it, then Yelm is not Yelm. Now it's just like everybody else. And my kids have a blast. I'm a 4th of July guy. I'm a holiday guy. You celebrate holiday on the holiday. That's me. Not everyone's like that. I understand that. So, but most people are. It's the 3rd and 4th are the majority of people, and Yelm goes wild with it, and it's really a lot of fun. And then my other question is the extreme fire danger under down below the language. Is that defined? Is there a definition? What constitutes extreme fire danger? Is it just like, it's extreme fire danger? I think so.
Yeah, so right now we're in a red fire. They just announced counties in a red flag. And so that's where I think the fire marshal comes in, as far as their ability to say it's too dry. And it's not just our fire marshal, it could be Thurston County's fire marshal, state fire marshal. So I think it's a combination of the people in the know of, is this too dry? So for example, if county says in Thurston County, we're shutting it down, it's an extreme fire, they've already been determined. We now would have the option to go, okay, we're gonna follow suit with that. We have something in our code that allows us to follow suit or not. We don't have to.
Yeah, I was gonna say
that defined somewhere what that is, how they determine that.
I would say it's just probably defined through the National Weather Service.
So we're in red right now?
Yeah, we're in a red flag.
Did controlled fire to the JBLM did controlled fire today? Is that what they did?
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
So that's what I'm saying. What is the definition? So it's unbiased based on somebody's opinion, like something that's factual or be like, hey, you can't deny that because here's the science. Here you go.
They do. It's the humidity level.
Yeah.
It's the humidity, the wind, a variety of things that come into play. I mean, like if you look at the grass right now, it's brown and it's because of the low humidity and the wind.
One of the things
it's also the days without rain too.
Yeah, one of the things we could do in there is we could just add a line on what determines it to be extreme fire.
I'm saying point to the definition.
Yeah, say in periods of extreme fire danger as supported by boom, boom, boom. So it's not just a random, our own feeling of grown grass.
I'll tell you what, Joshua, it's gonna be pretty rare where I can't, if this goes through, be very rarely I can cancel a 4th of July. At all.
I mean, this is for future. I mean, we have in the last few years have come across things that aren't defined and people have taken abuse of that. When you have something that's defined and concrete, like it's not based on somebody's opinion, it is on fact. Like, okay, we haven't had rain in 30 days, this constitute an extreme fire danger. That's what I'm saying, like have a set, okay, these are the parameters. If it hits this parameter, it's not based on somebody's opinion, it's based on these parameters. And that's this one. I'm wondering, where's that definition at?
I'll put something in there.
That's how it's determined, but I don't know the exact
No, I'm just saying, yeah, as long as it's there that we can point to and say, hey, these are the facts, like, it's not just somebody's opinion, it's.
But the fire marshal, commercial is the experts, so they're the ones making.
But he still needs a set of parameters, not just his opinion of saying.
Do we have in the past some record of
No, we do.
That already noted, you said you compared that last bit by other cities. You looked at other Thurston County.
This is Thurston County's.
Yes, so did it have it didn't have the
This
def.
is exactly what it has.
Okay, thank you.
So, can I say something? So currently, we're following the state. We're in line with the state.
Currently, we're following the old state. So right now, our hours that are listed in our code are somewhat less restrictive than the state.
Okay,
Even though we agreed to adopt the state, which we did.
which we did,
We
right?
didn't change our times to match when the state changed, which is why the new code will not list these hours. We'll just refer to the RCW that defines the state
And
time.
that's what I
Yes.
am for, because I think the Thurston County ordinance is way too restrictive. And it's gonna put a huge burden on law enforcement, huge.
Well, you don't have to have one or the other. You can pick pieces from each.
Yeah,
It's
but I
not
like-
an A or a B. You want the
But I
chicken
like
or
all
the
the,
fish.
I like all the pieces, personally. So,
I
yeah,
don't think I get to call on you, Brandon.
no, Brian,
In reference to what you had to say, Richardson, in reference to you buy it, you get to use it. People from Lake Lawrence, Clearwood, a variety of other areas that are in the county, they're coming into Yelm, buying the fireworks, and they don't get to use it. So I mean, again, I think we should be similar to the county.
Well, they should follow the county rules then, huh?
Okay, but where are they purchasing? They're purchasing when they come into Yelm because they don't have.
To know that if they still are outside the city limits, they should follow the rules of the county.
Right, which they can still purchase. They just can't use until the 3rd or 4th.
That's not our problem. People buy from the res and
I know, but that's what I'm saying is that particular excuse of you bought it and now you have the right to use it. It's not straight across the
within
board.
city limits, that makes sense.
Right, but I'm just saying for everybody that purchases, I just think now.
the city of Yelm we're talking about.
And I understand it's the city of Yelm, but I also know that there's been a concern the past few years in reference to it of, PTSD for soldiers, which, okay, if you want to go ahead and with the veterans and soldiers and go, okay, we're going to ignore that, not a problem, just be honest about it because you want to launch your fireworks. There are people who are complaining about the debris that's left on their property. I mean, I will tell you, I've got the past, I don't know how many years, been more, 5 or more. I have at least 3 areas that launch their mortars. And so what ends up in my backyard is the plastic, the cardboard, and everything else. It also ends up on my roof. I have 4 dogs that I'd like to be able to, instead of every day from June 28th to July 6th, be able to say, okay, I can release my dogs without having to go out first and clean up debris because my neighbors decided I love the mortars. Not only that, but again, within 5-house radius, I got mortars going all over me. So that's my concern is why can we not go with the same as Thurston County? It's still the 4th of July celebration and we're still selling, which means that
It'll just be a concentrated amount.
it'll just be 2 days that now everybody knows that these 2 days are when everything's going to go.
Yeah, then they can't discharge them.
I didn't come back to you.
I apologize.
But you said what I was gonna say. I think for the chief and his team, number 2 would be a nightmare. to
Yes,
try and follow this,
absolutely.
and you're nodding your head. Do you want to say anything about this, Chief?
I just think it's gonna tax us to the point where how are we gonna enforce it? And I understand that it's stipulating those restrictions, but are they gonna follow those restrictions? We can put out advertisement, we can talk about it all the time, but are the people going to follow that? And the ones that aren't gonna follow that, we're now gonna have to go out and enforce that. 4th of July is already a taxing time for us. And to now add more to that, we're gonna have to add more people to work that to be able to enforce it. Otherwise, it's just, it looks good on paper. And we're not able to enforce it.
County enforce it.
I don't know, I would have to ask them, but I live in the county and I know that fireworks are going on.
Like Lawrence.
But they can't, I can't imagine, they can't, how do they do that? I'm sure they do the best they can, but there's so many other things going on in our community other than just fireworks going on legally. That we're just taxed, so if we add that.
And then it's, and then it could probably add, if people are calling, this is the thing I would think that it could give you guys a bad name because people are calling. Then, well, they didn't show up because you can't. I mean, how are you gonna go to every single? Yeah.
People are used to nothing, so they're gonna do it anyway and say, oh, I didn't know.
The one thing I did want to remind council of is it was voted 45% to ban fireworks completely inside the city of Yelm limits. Your constituents, 45% wanted, obviously not a majority, but I do think that's relevant information for council to consider.
When was that poll?
It was a vote. It was last election to 2021.
That's less than the majority, right?
It is.
How many people voted for that?
I believe it was 45%.
No, what was the number?
I don't recall the number. 45% of the voters in that election.
Voters, yeah, so if only 2,000 voted, less than 1,000 people voted no, that's less
How many
than.
people voted for you?
I don't know, I'm just saying, you brought it up.
That same, not that same number though, am I right?
That's good. That's a good one. Yeah. Okay, yes, Brian.
But that's not relevant to this discussion.
Oh, we're talking about participants.
In reference to the enforcement, that's why I started off my thing by saying we don't have to necessarily next year, which is when this would go into effect, when we vote on it. If we decide to go to Thurston counties next year, you know, the enforcement of it is, it's educational. It's educational. Maybe we go, okay, we sit down, we decide that 5 years it's educational, trying to figure out how to go about doing it. But the excuse of they can't show up, they're not going to be able to. That goes for a lot of crime. Why bother enforcing? Because the police can't show up. I mean, we all of a sudden start having a large amount of domestic violence occurring in Yelm, where how many officers are on during one shift, chief?
Depends on the time of day, but it could be up.
What's the max?
4.
4?
Yeah.
Okay, 3 or 4. So if 5 people all of a sudden have domestic violence going on and the phone call goes in, one person's not getting responded to. So why bother enforcing it? Because we can't do it. No, we are talking about, we're going to use the excuse of we can't enforce it. So why bother? You know, what's really nice is that we also have people in the community that actually do follow the laws, that do follow the codes that we put out. It's not everybody's going to go, well, crap, I've been doing this for 10 years. I'm still going to continue to do it. We need to have faith in our constituents. And again, we're allowing the purchasing. We're just going to limit the watching. That's all I'm asking for.
Well, I do know, if you here's the thing is, if you put strong restrictions on something that everybody's used to, if you say this year, it's going to be different, next year's going to be different, then what they're going to do is they're going to make this year a big difference from next year. They're going to buy some of the biggest stuff. You're going to have some of the loudest stuff ever. If you say next year, we're going to kind of put a ban on things and everybody's going to go buck wild this year. And because there was those threats in the past where it's like, oh man, they're not going to let us do fireworks this year. And I remember those nights went on till like 2, 3 in the morning because everybody's like, we got to spend all our money because we can't do this next year. And I don't think that's what we're doing, but when there is restrictions put on things, especially with something like this, that is a representation of kind of a liberty and freedom of the, you know, our independence. It's people really take this to heart and they want to celebrate. And then if you say you're going to put restrictions on your independence holiday, then they're going to just really go nuts more than you could imagine.
Yeah, I don't see that there's any restrictions on the day or the day before.
They're celebrating. There's nothing there.
Yeah, we're still keeping that.
Thank you. For the numbers, there was asked 604 people with 44.41% voted no. 756 people which is 55.59 voted yes.
1,300 people roughly.
Or excuse me, I had that flip.
The other way.
Yeah, excuse me, flip the other way. Didn't want to.
Total voted.
Correct. Yeah, roughly.
Okay, good to know.
I want to point out what we have the police officer, the police department here, but we don't have someone from the fire department here to say what they think. And they are stressed out just as much as anybody else in any other organization. And this is what they prefer also, is the county. Because they're gonna respond to the accident of the fire.
Just to be clear, I'm not advocating for full ban. I'm against a full ban. I think
Yeah, no full
absolutely
ban.
January 4th. I also think the 31st, to be honest, should still remain.
There's not that much on the
Right.
31st normally, is there?
Oh, God, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
There's,
Yes. There's.
When is this coming to council on the agenda?
On the, second council meeting.
But we should probably get a good feeling, because this is now the third time we've talked about it, on what we want. So
Good feeling.
you got it.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got some feelings. Great.
We're not doing a vote here.
Just to see how people are feeling.
We can go down the line if you want to say, if you're supportive of A, B, or C, or what you would like to say. We can do that.
All of the above.
Would you like to start?
Yes, I
What would you
would
like?
go with the first chart. As it is, just don't change it.
Okay, and I would go with the second, with the exception of, so like option C. Is add December 31st in there. Mhm.
I would agree. Second one, and we can add December 31st.
I would go with the top chart.
I'm going with the top chart.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
So that's a yes for the second chart, Joseph.
Top chart.
45% of the people said it's broken.
And
5% said just leave it alone.
so we will put it on, again, there's gonna be a new council member too by that point. We don't know how they're
Yeah,
gonna,
true.
how they would want it. So, yeah, well, I mean, this is good discussion though, a good, solid discussion.
I
So
do appreciate you guys. I do. I'm not just saying that. I do.
I like the banter.
These are one of the things that, yeah, I go against what I believe personally, so. The greater freedom. But I'm a July 4th guy. I do not let off fireworks before July 4th. It annoys me.
good on you.
It annoys the crap out of me. I'm like, why are you guys laying off? It's not the 4th.
Yeah, you're not celebrating Independence Day.
You know, Independence Day is on the 4th. Do it then.
I agree.
So
I say you go come over to your place and hang out.
Yeah, you should. If we have
seven, what does the council want to see to
It's,
consider?
it sounds like the first option and the second option plus December 31st, if I'm hearing.
So we're gonna put both of those.
Yep. And council can decide at that point whether they want to or not.
In the language edition. It's not,
Yeah, bringing 2 options up.
no matter what, it'll have the language edition, or that will be a separate vote.
Well,
The language will be in both of them.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
And just were you just saying something, Josh? I agree with you on a lot of the points. I mean, I had dogs, they freak out, the fireworks make a mess. The whole thing can be a pain in the butt. But
Yeah, I'm still picking up stuff
in
out there.
general, it's just too many restrictions. Can we just like loosen up, let people have fun? We'll deal with it. That's where I'm coming from.
Then let's go.
Do it.
Then let's go ahead and say, why bother going after somebody who has a heroin addiction?
Okay.
To the mayor's report.
The only thing I gotta say is I appreciated the EDC coming out there. I think it's a valuable tool for us. And if council wants, if you think, Joshua, if you think that we should have more commercial space, office space, we can absolutely bring that, and I will absolutely bring that forward, see if we can get some developers out here through the EDC. But if someone else wants something else, please, yeah.
I think you left for that
Yeah.
portion.
Healthcare, is that what you said?
Medical care.
Yeah.
Medical service.
Okay.
Yeah.
The plaza with the Goodwill, most of that's empty.
Yeah.
The lease space, but it's highly expensive and but
It'd be interesting to reach out to the city of Lakewood, because I know they were advertising for businesses, the city was, to come there, because I got the advertisement. Somehow I was in their algorithm. I'm like, well, this is interesting. I mean, seeing a city advertising for business come there. I mean, at least to me anyways.
Did you take that initiative and reach out to them?
No.
So wait, did they, were they saying this is what we have to offer or demographics or?
It was Facebook advertising. It was like, come to Lakewood, set up your business here and blah, 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 you know, and I was like, that's
Something we can explore.
something to consider looking into.
Yeah, good idea. That's all I have. Any questions or anything on any?
Okay, initiatives, Joseph?
Oh, no, I don't have any. Looking forward to the 4th of July.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did have one. Just a reminder, the 4th of July, the city hall is closed. We do have a scheduled study session that day. We are canceling that just because it's on 4th of July. Next meeting would be that upcoming city council meeting.
But we're gonna have a barbecue for all of us, so we can enjoy a nice good barbecue
We're
while
gonna
we're.
shoot a fire.
You can join Brian at City Hall and we can do you can do a barbecue.
I'm really excited about this.
Joshua.
I had something, but did not have time to prepare it for tonight, so I have to wait.
You even have to say that. Okay,
Yes, to keep you in anticipation.
I don't have anything.
Something that I would like to hopefully have a community member help out with. Is, and what came to mind, and this is something that can't be done this year, but maybe next year we can get going. Free food for Tacoma, and I think there's even one for Washington. I've seen a couple of community members when I was on Facebook that were interested in doing something like this. I think it'd be really great if we could find a way, because we are a food desert here in Yelm. We don't, we have a lot of green space, a lot of gardeners in the community. It'd be really nice if we can find some way to organize and do something similar to what they do in Tacoma and a variety of other locations to help alleviate that food desert that we're in particular with fresh produce. So that's something that if there's a community member that would like to help out with that, I'd really appreciate it. Another thing is
I'm sorry, what?
it's
Explain it.
okay.
Sorry.
What it is, like for myself, I have my garden beds. If I grow too much zucchini, I can put it somewhere where the way that it works in Tacoma is there's a variety of people that have on their property, they have the stand. And all it says is take what you need, leave what you want, or leave what you can. And, it works out. So it allows people who have excess that they've grown. And they even go so far as to, they hear from a property owner that says, hey, I've got fig trees. I've taken what I wanted. Can you get some volunteers to come out and pick the figs? And lo and behold, they get distributed out. It's a wonderful way to help, people not allow food to go to waste. Because if you've looked at the numbers that they're reporting, if I remember correct, it's about somewhere between 35 to 45% of the food that we purchase from stores ends up in the landfill. And so this is a way that we can, as a community, help out with that food desert that is occurring here.
Why don't we connect somebody with the Bounty for Families community garden? Where they're out there gardening, giving away food, people can learn, and we can have a day or so a week when you can have.
No, I mean, and that's what I'm saying is that we can, if somebody out there, because I know we're watched by the whole community, it'd be really, yep. It'd be nice if somebody wants to, they can reach out. In addition, I want to say for the past 2 months, I'd say about almost 2 months, we've had a wonderful, lively discussion in reference to not just Pride. It's not about Pride Month, but about the event that's going to be occurring this weekend. I appreciate everybody who has come forward to the council and brought up their concerns. I know that there are a lot of concerns out there. I want to thank the mayor for coming up with doing the research, providing the answers to us as council members in reference to our questions. I just ask that this weekend, let's still be the civil community that we are and allow the event to occur without any major or even minor incidents. That's what I'm looking for, is to just, we've had our discussion. It's about to happen. Let's be respectful of each other as human beings. That's all I have.
Yeah, two things. One is I got the email about the homelessness committee and those that are being appointed at our next meeting, and I'm so looking forward to that beginning. Just really going, because I noticed in a lot of the applicants, they mentioned homeless or the unhoused. And so it's definitely an issue that our citizens and those that are leaders in our community want to see addressed and together. And that would serve perfectly for that. The next thing was the medical services. I wanted to touch on that again. It's not just that, but the rural transportation for those to get to those services since they're so far away. So I've been talking with someone in regards to ensuring that their program that they currently have works to the best of its ability for those citizens that need access to healthcare. And then third, I wanted to check up on the council member retreat. We talked about dates, but I didn't get like a final on that.
We heard from 3 council members on this. Doesn't sound like there's much interest right now.
Okay.
No, I can respond.
Oh, I responded.
I responded.
I did. Oh, this is the 3 of us girls.
No,
No.
I said I responded.
Okay.
I'm not gonna call whoever, I might not have it right, but I didn't think I got from everybody.
I'm open to anything, just tell me when so I can tell my boss.
Okay, well, there's 2 dates and I think they were kind of circling on. I think the one question is whether you want to have it overnight or just one day. I got from the sense of the people answering at least for one day. Is that something that council would be open to, like on just a Saturday? With
Yeah,
one
the
of those days?
17th. Right?
I believe that was one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just said, let's,
That was one.
those dates, those only ones I could do.
And the one I picked was the only one I could do, so, and it wasn't bad, it was like June or July, I think.
Yeah.
further out,
Whatever.
what did you do? What day?
The only day I can't do it is the Mermaid Festival.
Oh, yes,
It's on
I'm
the
busy that
judge.
day too.
Yeah, but.
Also
Other than
that.
What is that?
that.
No, June 17th.
Something like that.
Yeah. The date's given, yeah, 17th is the only one I got. Okay.
So July is the only
July is
day.
Okay.
If there's Saturday in July, which it looks like there's a date we can do for most of you. And hopefully the new council member can also make that. But we would do it one day then on a Saturday. I think I said from 10 a.m. to 6 or something.
Second 29. That's what I got, I'll tell you right now.
So hopefully we can do one of those and I'll send that email out, I guess, this by the end of this week, then with a date. It's just final, if that's all right. And we go from there. Start
One
planning.
more thing, I looked for the emergency management. I have not been getting the emails to those events. So if I could,
Get you connected then.
yes, please,
Yeah, he's taking a note right now.
especially the one that's coming up on the 14th. Cause I didn't get the time.
Anything else?
No, that's really it.
No, I was gonna ask also about the retreat, so nothing else, and well said on the respect. I thought that was great. All right, great.
All right, we're done.
All right.
Real quick for